Meghan Markle's at it again, dazzling us with a blinding blizzard of frantic activity that looks like a lot, but upon closer examination, doesn't add up to very much at all. Amid this dervish-like perpetual pointless motion, reports once again proliferate that Her Montecito Majesty's marriage to permanently furious-looking Prince Harry is in trouble, and that her business empire that never was, never will be. Suddenly, the difficult Duchess is no longer the scam-jam flogging, honey-making, down-home domestic goddess. She's the self-styled queen of the scene in the wonderful world of high fashion. At least that, clearly, is what she wants to be. But what a week on Planet Meg. She's here, she's there, she's every bloody where. In Paris, in New York, in Washington, saying this, saying that, and, as always with the Duchess of Jargon, saying nothing that makes any sense, unless, of course, you speak Californian psychobabble. Cutting through her deep space gobbledygook is always a struggle. Hard to ever know just exactly what she's garbling on about. But of this you can be certain. In her own clunking, awkward, poorly explained way, the frenetic Ms. Markle is attempting to change course. Her trip to Paris, a city she'd previously said she could never go to because it was where Harry's mother Diana died in that horrific car crash, shocked her husband's friends. Her unannounced Sans Harry solo appearance at Paris Fashion Week, to which she invited herself, was an obvious attempt to make her mark on the haute couture circuit. Why else would she turn up wearing an eye-catching, cascading, sartorial disaster that made her resemble a badly dressed ghost, but was bound to get her noticed? Her designer label scheming was somewhat confirmed when the following weekend in New York, Meghan combined collecting a laughably undeserved Humanitarian of the Year award with meeting the editor of American Vogue magazine. Even though old Ginger Nuts was with his social mountaineer wife in Manhattan, the couple seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time apart, and witnesses observed that Harry appeared to be grinning for the cameras through gritted teeth. By all accounts, the dim Duke didn't look happy at all. Harry's a British royal. He's been famous from the moment he was born and always will be. His ambitious wife, meanwhile, remains a palpable fame chaser who comes across as ever more determined to cash in on her semi-regal status. Who wants to be a billionaire? She does, but so far, it just hasn't worked out. Word is, as expected, the profits from selling mundane domestic products on her weird online store, as ever, are rather less than astronomical. In one of her dizzying number of recent public appearances at a non-event also attended by America's top loser, Kamala Harris, Meghan played down getting dumped by Netflix, comparing her fate favourably to that of Barack and Michelle Obama's, the woeful wizards of woke, who were also shown the door by the streaming giant. And she waffled on about having the grace to pivot. Translation? Get set for a whole new direction. Meghan's moving on. Instead of more stupefying series of her dreary cooking dirge, with love, Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex indicated she's keen on making lots of short films. Translation? Instagram posts, like the ones she just treated us to, featuring her wardrobe full of expensive clothes, vast rows of high-heeled shoes, slices of pizza, and Harry grinning gormlessly in the background. A visual metaphor for the dismal duo's lopsided relationship, you might think. I couldn't possibly comment. And now, after Harry's horrors with Centre Ballet and African Parks, a new charity scandal for Meghan to worry about. The British branch of World Vision, the children's charity, for which the Duchess is a global ambassador, stands accused of running a hostile and toxic workplace where complaints of racism, sexism and homophobia were ignored and silenced by bosses. These shock allegations have been denied, but the Charity Commission has launched a full investigation. It was on a trip to Rwanda for World Vision that Meghan was famously photographed hugging a little African boy. That was in 2016, the year she met Harry, when her glittering royal life lay ahead. Now it's all behind her, and who knows what tomorrow might bring. Not Meghan, that's for sure, but thank God for giving her ladyship the grace to pivot.
Also, the biggest news story of the weekend. We are delighted to be joined by the Royal Editor of The Sun, host of The Sun's show, Royal Exclusive, Matt Wilkinson. I phoned up Ryan yesterday and said, you need to get the main man tomorrow because everybody will be at him. Prince Andrew could face a police probe. He became the first member of the royal family to be investigated by police for more than 20 years. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot here and you're going to hate me. Who was the last royal to be investigated by the police?
Oh, interesting. I know Princess Anne appeared in court.
Yes.
So is she the last person to be investigated?
That's all I was thinking when she was attacked in the Mall. Didn't she have to turn up? But I can't think of a royal that was probed. I don't know the answer. I just wondered if you did. I don't know. I can't think back 20 years. See if you can find that right. To be investigated by the police for more than 20 years. She wasn't investigated, she was a witness. No,
it was also, if we're going to go down this rabbit hole, so to speak, it was about her dog. I believe that her dog was, she was fined for her dog attacking another dog. And she appeared in court with Princess Anne.
He's dead right. That is
bucks.
why he is the Royal Editor of The Sun. You see, I did that deliberately to make you look good.
Thank you.
Explain to me, we talk off air, we talk on air. There's words today that the MPs are demanding legislation to strip him of his royal titles. He's lost the Duke of York, he's lost the Order of the Garter. What he's left us is the birthright of being a prince. What is left for Prince Andrew? Seriously?
Not a lot. I mean, at the moment, so obviously he still keeps hold of this title, and it's almost an effort by the King to save a bit of time. To save a lot of Parliament's time. Because if he had, forced Andrew to actually give up the title fully, he would have to go to Parliament. He'd have had to have kept the Duke of York title for that duration of time, which would have been unpalatable, and it would have wasted a lot of time with Parliament.
There was a lot of pressure to be brought on Andrew, wasn't there, last week? I think William was probably central to it, and I think the King finally developed a pair, but it is his brother, and it's a very difficult thing, because I suspect, without saying the wrong thing, people will always look in the mirror and say, what have I done wrong? But this guy he's a car crash. He's beyond a car crash now. I mean, and I said to you off air, I won't lie to the audience, I said, don't you think he should go? And you went, where?
Well, this is the problem. This is the problem last week, and we tried to explain it in the articles that we've been covering, but we were getting word at the start of the week, after The Sun on Sunday wrote the story saying that he'd lied about when he contacted Epstein. That was the final straw, the final of final straws. That really stunned the palace, and it stunned the King. They knew they had to act. So there was a lot of pressure on Andrew throughout the week to do the right thing. They wanted him to make the right decision rather than it be forced on him. They wanted Andrew to make the statement, and as I say, he got dragged kicking and screaming until the end of the week, when he finally put that statement. And even that statement is a little bit mealy-mouthed. I'm not overly happy with that statement. You're not really showing any contrition.
No contrition at all for the victims at all. I completely with you.
I think he was forced to do it. Otherwise, they would have said to him, "Right, we'll go to Parliament. We'll make MPs debate you. We'll have you, discussed all over the papers for months and months and months, and go on. Let's just have a clean cut now. You hand back these titles. I think one of the most, or give up the titles, not hand them back. But one of the most important things I think for them was Beatrice and Eugenie. We've seen a photograph of Eugenie today. She's been at Royal Lodge. Honestly, she looks absolutely devastated, and I think there is concern, particularly with the daughters, that they're being tarnished by the sins of their father, and the belief was that it would be unfair if they were to completely abolish the York House, completely take away the title. It would mean that they would lose the York title, they would lose certain rights, and they didn't think that was fair. So between Andrew and the King, they came to this agreement so that it would kind of be a little bit kinder to the daughters.
I think in the mix should also be Prince William, because it's no secret to anybody that he was livid the other day at that funeral, the Duchess of Kent, and he wants them out of Royal Lodge. Now, I live 3 miles away. It's very difficult in the world that we live in. I'm a hopelessly keen royalist, but this madness about him still living in a huge house with servants and all that, whatever you say, is going down like a cup of cold sick with people who think the monarchy has passed its best. And there comes the point at which the King, and certainly William, because I think sooner rather than later, obviously, he will be king. I don't know, you're right. People have started saying to me, what about his mental health? What about Fergie's mental health? we have to always acknowledge that's the case, right? But we also have to say your mental health was fine when you were begging Epstein for money and flying on his jet and allegedly doing all these things that you were doing. And she's been a piece of work for years, right? What do you do? I mean, is the king terrified of banishing them? If they banish us, they'd sell their soul to any television network or newspaper that would want their story, wouldn't they?
Well, I suppose that is a possibility. I mean, the thing that's sick.
Imagine if he was banished. Where would you send him? I don't know. I mean, any newspaper will pay millions for that story.
Yeah.
And you say he hasn't got... He's going to have stuff on the royal family, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, it's the fact that they don't actually have any levers to pull.
Yeah,
they've done absolutely everything, and they have to persuade Andrew to make that decision himself. And it feels that that's what they achieved last week. You're right about William. He was seething about the Duchess of Kent's funeral. I was there. I was standing outside, and William afterwards was absolutely seething. And there were beginning to be meetings that something needs to be done, but it was that email that proved that he had lied that really kicked it over the edge. But I'm quite sickened by the emails that we've seen over the weekend where he's trying to besmirch Virginia's name, and you say whatever you want about Virginia.
Well, let's talk about this.
And people do, but it's the fact that Andrew appears that his first reaction after he hears about this woman is to immediately start thinking about, right, well, how can I
So the accusation, which is central to this police probe, is that he used his we scored special police bodyguards.
It's a close protection officer, a taxpayer-funded bodyguard, yeah.
And he said to him, there's a name, there's a date of birth, there's a social security number, go and dig some dirt. If that is true, if he's used that, I mean, that is... And apparently there's a guy called Perkins, who was the Queen's deputy press secretary, I think, or deputy... He emailed him and went, I'm just using the Met Police to dig on her. I mean, that's extraordinary, man.
Yeah, I think it's a despicable behaviour. But one of the things that has been pointed out to me, was sources I was speaking to are saying that this may not be criminal behaviour because it's very unlikely that this very professional, senior, experienced police officer would do such a thing because he would know that he'd get in so much trouble. And it's more a kind of desperate Prince Andrew being naive and arrogant.
So where did it go from that? They've got to presumably speak. Yeah.
This is what the police are trying to work out, and it's not like an official investigation at the moment. They're looking into the reports.
I don't mean to say the wrong thing to you. You're a royal editor, but I suspect many people listening to this, if I said, could you imagine a police officer from the Met Police doing something that wasn't quite 100% straight? And they go, yeah, all the time, Jess. So God knows what happened. I'm not besmirching the guy. We don't know. But it gets worse and worse on a daily basis. I read, and we had this off air, I read in some paper, not as great as yours, that there are concerns now that she might even turn on him, Fergie, when she runs out of money because he's just... I mean, you know, they're as thick as thieves, but is that likely? God knows, mate. It's a mess, isn't it?
Well, look, they're incredibly close, and I know that they're both at Royal Lodge at the moment. I mean,
separate ends of Royal Lodge.
Separate ends of Royal Lodge, but there's huge pressure on the pair of them. I cannot see Fergie walking away from Andrew because if you remember when Andrew gave up his title, Sarah's also given up her title, so they are lockstep in how they're reacting. And I say they've got their daughters are very, very stressed about this, but Andrew has brought it all upon himself. This is something that's been going on for 15 to 20 years.
Do you think he could see? Could he not see
what
was going to happen?
He's never faced up to the responsibility. He's never shown really any kind of contrition or understanding the impact of what he's done. And I don't think he has understood. I mean, looking at that statement he put out, it feels to me like a man that was dragged kicking and screaming to make that statement. Otherwise, what on earth would happen to him? One person, we were talking about, you know, kicking him out of Royal Lodge. He's got a cast iron lease, and one person did say to me, well, what are we meant to do? Sit outside with the king and a bulldozer and say, Andrew, you've got 5 minutes to leave Royal Lodge. That's the situation. It's like a siege of Royal Lodge. He will not leave it.
In terms of the monarchy, something that you and I both believe in fervently, where does this leave the people who say the monarchy's past its sell-by date?
Well, it leaves them a couple of crises away from, you know, of being past its sell-by date. We've currently got the King. The King was out today and he was absolutely brilliant. He was up in Manchester at the Jewish Centre where the synagogue, and there was hundreds of people out there to see the King. So there's still this huge level of support for the King and the power. But we are, you know, we've got the Dukes of Hazzard, haven't we? We've got Prince Andrew, the ex-Duke of York, and Prince Harry, the current Duke of Sussex. They're the Dukes of Hazzard, heaping so much scandal on the royal family. If that infected Charles, infected William and Catherine, then I think that, you know, the people that are saying we shouldn't have a monarchy, or the people that think that they are they are one step away from disaster than we could be if we get another scandal going on to William or Catherine.
Do you know what's really... I know we have to break, but do you know what's really interesting? Before the old man died, do you know what he said to me? He said, the problem with the monarchy nowadays is that there's no mystique. Of course, I work in the media, you work in the press, and at the end of the day, the royal family have had to integrate that into their lives. But the frightening thing is, if you step back, and I'm a royalist, people in the end are going to go, and that's a real tragedy, because there's no doubt that and in this world we live in now, the next thing I'm going to hear is that somebody's cancelled the monarch because, you know, we should be apologising. They still create huge interest, huge revenue, but he is a stain, isn't he? Just very briefly, what do you think happens to Andrew?
Well, if it happens to Andrew, do you know what? I've been asked this the last couple of weeks by the palace. What should we do to Andrew? They're kind of like, what on earth do we do? I mean, he needs to make the big decisions himself. I suggest he goes and finds a friend that he knows in Bahrain or Abu Dhabi or somewhere like that, and goes and have a quiet life, and someone else funds him rather than the the royal family or us.
Joining me live in the studio is the man whose book entitled set this entire story in motion. Of course, this book is now going to provably become a historic document that reflects not just the downfall of Prince Andrew, but potentially a fatal impact on the monarchy itself. Entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York is out now, and it's got the country talking, and it's got Prince Andrew in hot water. Its author is Andrew Lownie. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
So first of all, you've been working on this book for how long now?
Well, it took me 4 years of research, and I approached about 3,000 people, about 300 talked to me. So, and it took a lot of time to get a lot of these people to go on the record, but I think a lot of them were pretty appalled by the way that Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson had operated, had got away with it, had been protected by the palace. And I suppose I then got these senior diplomats and naval officers to talk, which was great.
You faced an unprecedented wall of resistance on the part of the Yorks in your pursuit of the truth, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I mean, I approached them originally to see if they would cooperate, not because it was not going to be authorised, but because I felt it was important that they should be allowed to help shape the narrative.
So you approached Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson?
Yes, I had a meeting with Sarah Ferguson. She decided not to cooperate. She decided, in fact, to tell all her friends not to talk to me, and my publishers got letters, legal letters, warning them that they were being watched, what they put in the book. I was told that my social media would be monitored, and that attempts were made basically to intimidate me.
So you felt quite threatened by the Yorks, really, in your pursuit of the truth?
Yes, they clearly had something to hide, and that's what proved to be the case.
How did that encounter with Sarah Ferguson, the then Duchess of York, go? What did you make of her in the flesh?
Well, it was actually the day that Andrew settled with Virginia Giffray, so she disappeared she was in my house, and she disappeared for a few minutes to sort of bathroom to take the call. She arrived with one of her products, which she sells to put on your face, but we found it was far more effective on our saucepans.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And she was, I mean, she was very charming. She got down on her knees and put her arm around my waist and tried to say that the photograph was faked and all sorts of things.
Oh, do you mean the infamous photograph of Andrew and Virginia Giffray with...
Exactly, yes.
With Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell in the background?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so they were really trying to sort of shape the narrative in that sense at that stage. But she was, you know, she was perfectly friendly, but clearly she didn't want to get involved.
I've started the book. It's a page-turner. I had to cancel my engagements for the afternoon because it's so dramatic and it reads like the most compelling piece of fiction. Of course, it's actually true. And it's got everything, the story, hasn't it? Without wishing to trivialise the serious implications of what Andrew may or may not have done, it does have everything. Sex, money, royalty, power.
Yes, and I think also it's a sort of black comedy. It's a tragic comedy. It's about a fall from grace from people because of their faults. But I think just the things that they do are so bizarre sometimes, and the extravagance and the ridiculous nature of the deference towards them, I think, you know, is quite interesting.
Yes, indeed. The King seems to be quite widely respected as king. I don't really feel he's put a foot wrong since taking to the throne. Anne is admired as a very hard-working, no-nonsense royal family member. Then you've got Edward, who, apart from, you know, a couple of business interests that went sideways, he's not really done too much wrong. Where did Elizabeth and Philip go so badly wrong with Andrew? Why is he the perceived black sheep of the family?
Well, it's a good question because, I mean, clearly his activities have undermined the good work the other members of the royal family do. He's just very different in temperament. I think he was spoilt as a child in a way the others weren't. He was given no boundaries. He knew he could get away with bad behaviour. And that's continued throughout his life. And the same has happened in the Navy, where he was over-promoted. It's happened, at school. And so he sort of, knows that he's invincible, or thinks he is. And Sarah's exactly the same. I mean, she started off as a sweet middle-class girl, a little vulgar, but she then realised that she too could, she was in the sweetie shop and she could go wild.
Most definitely. And she has proved to be, as the book demonstrates, a relentless liability for Andrew and for the royal family. I mean, the two of them together, we need the equivalent of the blind leading the blind, but it was the two of them have held hands and walked into hell.
I call them Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, they are partners in crime. I mean, they're joined together. They're both narcissists. In some ways, if he had married, let's say, Koo Stark, it might be a different story now.
Yeah.
But I think they just helped each other, and that's what's kept that bond going. It's the happiest divorced couple is actually a criminal enterprise.
And one thing, an abiding theme of the book appears to be that both Andrew and Sarah are highly self-destructive. I mean, almost all of this, they are the authors.
Absolutely, and I mean, people have warned them time and time again not to do things. So, for example, like the Newsnight interview, and they've just ignored it and gone ahead. So, in some ways it's difficult to feel sorry for them, except that they do self-sabotage them the whole time. She's sort of like Lazarus. She rises each time. She goes on Oprah. We may remember the sting by the News of the World in 2010, where she was caught selling access to Andrew. Not, I have to say, the first time that had happened. And yet somehow she comes through. She plays the ditzy girl, and everyone thinks she's a bit of a victim, and off she goes again.
And it seems to be that his greatest error of judgment was his friendship with the now disgraced billionaire paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, who took his own life in prison under, I would argue, slightly murky circumstances. What did his friendship with Epstein tell us about Andrew's character and his motivations?
Well, it was described as the relationship between a rattlesnake and a mouse. But I think for Andrew, he thought he was getting access to useful contacts. That's what he said at Newsnight. He clearly had an access to lots and lots of women. And of course, Epstein paid a lot of Fergie's bills. I mean, Fergie claimed there were only £15,000, but my information was it was more like £2 million. And we've got accounts in the papers today talking about the long financial relationship between the two. And for Epstein, of course, it gave him status. There he was in Balmoral and Windsor, and access to some very useful people. Andrew was actually taking Epstein on some of these taxpayer-funded flights as a special trade envoy, and actually helping Epstein do business when he was meant to be promoting British trade.
Did Andrew suffer from what Harry has complained about, which is the curse of being the spare?
Well, I mean, he was second in line to the throne until the Falklands. I don't really buy that. I mean, because clearly Anne and Edward do their bit. They support the monarchy. Prince Philip, after all, walked a few steps behind the Queen all his life, so they can do it. I think he just thought he could get away with it. He was spoilt. He was greedy. He saw opportunities, and I'm afraid people turned a blind eye. I think the shocking thing for me was that the Queen knew about his activities and let it pass. When people came and complained at the palace, diplomats and others, even MI6 came to her with complaints about bribes he was taking, she did absolutely nothing about it. And the palace actually tried to shut down the Giuffre story by threatening ABC television with no more access to the royals if they actually ran their investigation. So I think there's some responsibility back at Buckingham Palace for this. It's not just Andrew.
Was Prince Andrew, in your estimation, has he been predominantly motivated by money and sex?
Yes.
And where does that come from, do you think?
Well, I mean, his father was a pretty promiscuous character. I mean, her mother and father also had lots and lots of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, Major Ronald Ferguson was a serial philanderer, wasn't he?
He was, and I mean, and Susan Brantes had an affair with Prince Philip. I mean, that must have been a strange experience to know that, when you marry the daughter. But I think also Andrew had always been drawn to rich people, even at school. The Narcos family were at Gordonston. He was drawn to them. Sarah was used to the jet-set life after she began to live with Paddy McNally. And they just learnt never to turn right on a plane.
And the two of them were Sarah and Andrew, remarkably profligate at the expense of UK taxpayers, incredibly, as you mentioned earlier, greedy, just very greedy people. I mean, can you give us some examples?
Well, I mean, certainly profligate in the sense of and with taxpayers' money, in that Andrew would commandeer private jets for quite short journeys, or helicopters, all at the taxpayers' expense, which seemed to be someone let these things through. But the extravagance was, you know, flying on Concorde. She would send a secretary on Concorde to just deliver a bit of paper to someone. She would organise huge banquets and then actually just eat kettle crisps. Yeah. She would spend huge sums of money entertaining people, opened very expensive bottles of champagne which were left unopened. I mean, she had a huge staff, I mean, including one person just to wrap up presents and a couple who just went round picking up dog mess.
It's truly remarkable, some of the anecdotes. She'd have courtiers make an amazing meal and, as you say, not eat it, have a bowl of pasta, eat some crisps. It's pretty wild. Mail on Sunday today, 2 royal bombshells. Epstein, they report, set Prince up with second sex abuse victim, and royal bombshell number 2. Andrew told the Met to dig the dirt on Virginia. Your reaction to that story suggesting that taxpayer-funded bodyguards were commanded by Andrew to find some dirt on this woman that accused him of serious, egregious activities?
Yes, well, I mean, you know, none of the police protection officers would talk. I know that when they raised objections, they were told that if they would like to go back on the beat in Brixton, that was certainly an option. So there was a lot of pressure. The PPOs tend to be Freemasons. It's a very closed group, and there's a very strong sense of murder there. But certainly I raised questions with the Met about the investigations, did FOIs, and I got nowhere with them. They wouldn't tell me whether they investigated Andrew or not. I think Channel 4 and Virginia Giuffre, and I think even Di Davis, the former head of security, had raised questions with the Metropolitan Police that Andrew should be investigated for some of these perceived offences, and I think the whole thing went nowhere. No one was going to investigate a member of the royal family. The MPs 20 years ago were calling the National Crime Agency, saying that there were grounds to investigate Andrew. Again, nothing was done. It seems the royals are above the law. But that, I think, may change now. I think this new material today, you know, I think there are grounds on misconduct in public office. There are certainly grounds under data protection. And I do hope that now there will be a proper investigation into both of their activities, and particularly his time as Special Trade Envoy. I think one of the scandals is the government have not released the files for his time as the Trade Envoy, files which should be in the National Archives. I've put in hundreds of requests, and each one has been met with evasiveness and lies by the Foreign Office and the Department of Trade.
Is the Prince Andrew scandal now an existential threat to the monarchy? The author whose book started all of this in train, Andrew Lownie, the author of Entitled, stays with us, and that's next. Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York, is the devastating best-selling book which really opened up the Prince Andrew can of worms. It's a bestseller and everyone's talking about it. And of course, since its publication, the Duke of York is no longer, and he is simply Prince Andrew. But should he face further sanctions? Well, with me in the studio is Andrew Lownie, the author of Entitled. Andrew, do you think the King has gone far enough in leaning on Andrew to relinquish the Duke of York and his membership of the Order of the Garter?
No, I don't. I don't think this is going to satisfy public disquiet about what's happened. It doesn't. It's pretty meaningless. I think he should be stripped. I mean, it may be difficult. It may require parliamentary time, but I think people, you know, don't find it very strange that he's, you know, he's not a duke, but he's a prince now. I think that he should be an ordinary citizen. The prince title should go. I think he should be stripped properly of the Garter. He's, I think, an honorary vice admiral. He's still in the line of succession. He's still a councillor of state. He's still on the royal website. You know, if they are serious about dealing with this problem, they need to actually totally distance themselves, because he's actually damaging the monarchy as it stands. I mean, you know, this infected limb is now infecting the body itself.
Is exile the only option in order for the King to resolve this issue and move on?
Well, I think, you know, the honourable thing, and Andrew always describes himself as an honourable man, would be to give up a royal lodge and to go and live in exile. He's got a palace in Abu Dhabi given to him. There are plenty of places he could go to lie low. I think
and he's got enough money so I'm told.
Yes, he's got plenty of money. He's inherited money. He's made a lot of money over the years from his business activities, so he could easily do that. I mean, he would be compensated for leaving Royal Lodge. That was the deal. They've just sold some houses in Belgravia. They made some money from selling a Swiss chalet. There's plenty of money there, and I think the embarrassment is to see him on the Windsor estate, whether he's riding his horse or scowling behind his wheel of his Land Rover. People just don't want to see him now.
Do he and Sarah remain a team for the foreseeable?
Well, I think this is an interesting question. I suspect that she won't want to go to Abu Dhabi. I mean, she'll go off to the States and reinvent herself. So I suspect that we will see this parting. You know, she kind of hung in there limpet like because he was Duke of York, and she could monetize that position. I think now that she's playing Sarah Ferguson and in disgrace, I think it's going to be harder, less interesting for her.
Having profiled him in such detail, where do you think Andrew's head is at this morning? How do you think he's feeling? What's going through his mind?
Well, I think he's very self-centred. He never thinks of other people. I mean, this was sort of the problem with the Newsnight interview. There was no sense of empathy for the victims.
Yeah.
And so he'll be just thinking he's been hard done by and be angry.
So he'll play the victim card, and he'll convince himself that he's a victim.
Yes, I think so, and she'll do exactly the same. I mean, what he really misses is the pomp and ceremony that came with being a royal. That's his whole sense of identity. So not being able to go to the Garter lunches and to sit, you know, to stand on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, those are things that will really hurt him, not the end of his reputation.
And in terms of where we go from here, so he's relinquished, as you say, a couple of those titles. He remains the prince. What do we know of his relationship with King Charles? Are the two men close? Do they get on?
No, they're not close. They're very different personalities. I think there was a certain amount of jealousy between them. Andrew felt he could do a better job than Charles. Charles envied Andrew's good looks, the freedom he had for his own career. I think Charles has a certain sentimental attachment to his brother, and he gave his mother an undertaking he would take care of him. But I think he can see the reputational damage. I mean, the person who's driving this is William, who is much more ruthless and is aware that he's going to inherit a mess unless it's sorted out now.
Yes, and therefore, on the occasion of William's coronation, well, some of the papers, including the Telegraph, are reporting that he will not attend the coronation of King William when it happens. I think we can bear that. That's unlikely that William would tolerate that. Are there any sanctions that William would consider when he becomes king?
Well, I think it depends what happens now, but I think he would certainly find ways to get him out of Royal Lodge. I think he would certainly strip him of his princedom and some of the other things. So, you know, I think it will just depend what happens over the next few weeks.
So he's got to hope that his father resolves this issue before he becomes king, to remove that headache from him.
That's what the hope is. And I think the worry is that there are more damaging revelations to come, which there are. I have a lot of material which I'm putting into an updated paperback in the summer. I know that there are much more to come out from the Epstein revelations. We're beginning to see them today, and that will continue. There are other books coming. So we have Virginia Giuffre's book on Tuesday, but there's another book called Blue Butterfly by another victim coming out next month. And I think we will now get more victims coming forward, and I think more people coming forward with stories. You know, the fact the protection officer has now spoken to the papers suggests that others will come forward. And I think this thing will begin to unfurl, and it's going to be really bad.
Yes, those non-disclosure agreements at a certain point won't be worth the paper they're written on, will they? No. If there's enough of a critical mass of stories that paint a picture of Andrew as a man of poor judgment and potentially worse. Is it worth, for the purposes of devil's advocacy, to point out that he's been convicted of no crimes? Is there an element to which this man has been thrown under the bus and is the victim of hearsay and trial by media?
No, I mean, I think there's plenty of evidence. We've had the evidence just in the last few weeks of him lying about how long he knew Epstein. You've got the evidence in my book, which is, I think, pretty damning and pretty comprehensive. You've got, plenty of testimony. I mean, he's been shown, both of them, time and time again, to have lied. And I don't think anything that either of them says can be taken seriously now. And that comes, from my 4 years of research. I don't say that lightly.
Does the king have one hand tied behind his back? Is there a concern on the part of palace officials and the monarch that if he's too hard on Andrew, Andrew could exact revenge? Because, of course, he is the king's brother. He knows where the bodies are buried. And is there a risk that Andrew, if pushed too far, could do a Harry, move abroad, write a book, make a TV show and destroy the royal family?
Yes, I mean, that's always been the concern. I think it's more likely to come from Sarah than from Andrew, and I think it's more likely to be done through a cutout, a sort of Omid Scobie figure. But I think the one bit of pressure the royal family have is the future of the two daughters. And I think if they were seen to somehow undermine the royal family, the penalties would be exerted on the daughters. So that's the deal. Because
you have to feel for the girls this morning, don't you?
Well, I'm afraid I'm one of the commentators who doesn't feel for the girls too much. I mean, I know quite a lot about them and their involvement in what their parents were up to, and so I'm afraid I don't have a great deal of sympathy for them.
Do you think that they've inherited some of the traits of their parents?
I'm afraid so.
That's a concern, isn't it? And so, I mean, what is the likelihood that Andrew could write a book? Because, of course, if he did, he would make millions.
Well, I think would people take him seriously, because he's been shown time and time again to have lied. He denies actually even having met Virginia Giuffre, so it would be quite a change to suddenly say, well, I did, and this is here are the gory details. So I think it has to be done through a cutout. But yeah, I think I think the royal family clearly have baked that in. They accept that may be the case, and they'll take the hit.
Yeah, do you think that in regards to Andrew's decision to relinquish his Duke title and his membership of the Order of the Garter, that was somehow a negotiated settlement in which Andrew keeps the Royal Lodge and keeps his status as a prince?
Yes, I mean, it was a fudge. You know, the titles are only in abeyance, and I think that the feeling was that this might be enough, but it's always too little, too late.
Yeah.
And they're way behind public opinion here. I think they need to get ahead of it by doing something very decisive. And this should be coming from the King. It shouldn't be a statement from Prince Andrew, filled with some of the stuff he said before, which we know is not true.
How existential a threat is this scandal, a scandal unearthed by your book entitled To the Royal Family, to the Monarchy?
Well, I think, you know, as you kindly said, I think this is the biggest scandal in living memory. I think it's really now threatens the future of the monarchy and the trust and respect that people hold.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us for the most compelling interview. Let me tell you that entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York is one of the biggest sellers in recent years, and it's out now.
What a weekend for the British royal family, JK. Not positive press.
Can I just say thank you? Oh God, he spilt, no, it's a new man. He's just spilt tea all over my most important piece of paper. Stay there once. It's not his fault. He's done a very good job. So I thought of you when I was in bed on Friday night.
Ah, okay. Well, I need you to explain yourself.
Well, I was with Mrs. No, I wasn't with Mrs. Carl. I was with Mrs. Carl, actually, but I did think of you because it flashed up about Andrew, and I thought, that poor mayor's going to be busy all weekend. Have you been at it? I mean, there's so much I want to talk to you about. I had Matt Wilkinson on from The Sun in the first hour. And he was saying, I said, why doesn't he just go now? And he went, where? What do you do with the guy? And there are now rumours in this country that people are, and I'd love your take on this, you know, they're saying, what about Andrew's mental health? What about Fergie's mental health? That's the world we live in now, isn't it? And I'm not being disrespectful to either of them. They didn't have any mental health issues and they were begging money from Epstein, but there we go. What's your take on the fact that, well, not only has he lied, but he's actually facing a police probe now for using one of his personal protection officers, allegedly, to put her down? It's appalling, man.
I mean, that was the biggest takeaway for me over the weekend because, of course, this is a fluid situation. We're finding out about new details of Virginia's book. Every few minutes, we're finding out new details from the Epstein files that are slowly being leaked in the States. So we don't know what we're going to find out next. One of my biggest takeaways was that it was a 10-minute phone conversation with the King. And initially, it sounded like the King was cool, calm, and was just like, this is a burden. I need you to fix it. But the most recent report suggests he said, I will take whatever task I have to remove your titles. I will go whatever route I have to remove legally, whatever, and it will humble you quickly. So you either voluntarily give up your titles and that there was a threat made. And ultimately, that is why Prince Andrew voluntarily gave up. I mean, legally, he's still the Duke of York. A lot of people are looking at this going, really, how are we holding him accountable if technically he still is the Duke of York?
I think that's a really, really good word, because the British public are a wonderful, strange bunch, and I include myself in that. We like contrition. We like an apology, a mea culpa, right? Not once, not on Newsnight. Even that statement was mealy-mouthed. Nothing about him smacks of, look, hands in the air, I've made a catastrophic mistake. I've tried to cover my own backside for years and I've fallen on my face. I admit it all. I just want a bit of peace and quiet. He still appeared.
What about I don't, you know, I still strongly believe in my innocence, but I am so devastated over the way that I've embarrassed my family throughout this process. Just be sensitive to the fact that your brother waited 70 years for this job and is having to navigate while having cancer your screw-ups.
Absolutely.
You know, your decades-old screw-ups. Be apologetic to the family that you continue to embarrass and disappoint.
And I think what was really interesting, and I know you'll be strong on this, is reading between the lines. I think there was a massive input here from Prince William, who we know at the Duchess of Kent's funeral, he looked like his head was about to explode as Andrew sidled up to him. There have been reports over here today, sweetheart, that when he becomes king, he will, if Andrew hasn't gone from Royal Lodge already, then he'll be forcibly moved out of there. But here's my question, and I said it to Matt, and I'd love your take. Let's just say they disappear to America, or probably can't go to America, anywhere, and are out of the royal circle, right? If they are as desperate as we're led to believe financially they will become, there isn't a newspaper or a network in the world that aren't going to throw millions in their direction to dish the dirt on the royal family. So is that Charles, yes, I need to be strong, but I don't want them cut off completely. Is it weakness, or is it him doing the job properly? That's another question, I suppose.
I think it's a combination of understanding that he can't have another loose Harry and Meghan spouting. I mean, every time Meghan Markle sits down with somebody, she sat down with Fortune magazine last week, and when asked about her strategy post-royal life, she said healing. Well, obviously that's a dig at the British royal family. They can't have Andrew and Fergie out in the world, you know, behaving in a similar fashion. But also, I do think that he made a promise to his mother. I do believe that to be true, that he promised his mother he would take care of him as much as he could. I don't think that was fair to the king. I don't think that that was fair to put that responsibility on him, because I do believe that potentially Prince Andrew was out of control in his younger years and felt invincible. But I do think that the king is a good man that would likely want to try to keep that promise.
See, I don't trust a word Andrew says, so I wouldn't put it. You'll tell me I'm talking rubbish. However much of his back was against the wall, he probably was forced into that. I bet you he did a deal with the king and said, listen, I'll do exactly, but you better help me out financially, mate, otherwise I'm screwed and I will go to a newspaper. I can see that with my hand on my heart, 1,000,000%. And you're right, Charles is a good guy, and he doesn't like, very much like his mother, Kins, he doesn't like confrontation, does he? He's not good at that.
No, and I'll just tell you, the reports over here in the States are that Prince William, once he ascends to the throne, will strip everyone that's not a working royal of their princely titles, their dukedoms, their HRHs, and that his children's are going to be parked until they're adults. And they determine themselves whether they want to be working royals or they'd like to be regular citizens. So I think that is something that Harry and Meghan should be concerned with. We saw Meghan using her HRH title on a gift basket to Jamie Kern-Lima. That is something the Queen specifically said do not do. And so I think that they should be worried about losing their titles and potentially losing their marketability here in the United States.
I've got a text here, Barry in Newcastle. Listen to this. Watch Kinsey Schofield's face as I read this out. Why is Andrew being advised by experts to bury himself somewhere? Surely this guy needs to face justice, go to the United States and face up to what he's done. If I was the king, I would hire the best lawyers, but insist for the credibility of the royal family that he hands himself in and faces up to the truth. Wow. It's not going away, mate, is it? It's not going away. It's not going to. And the point is that I think, Matt, and you make it really well. Where does this end? What do we, for all the people who are quite rightly saying he's done this, where does it end? Matt's right. Where do we send him?
Well, where do we send him? I mean, he has very rich friends that have kept him afloat in foreign countries. I don't think it's the United States. I think the second he steps on American soil, the authorities will swoop in and at least try to ask him some pretty tough questions, especially under a Trump administration. I say
Ryan's
that
got a good idea. We've got a new policy with France here about how to deal with immigration. It's called one in, one out. So when we get a French migrant next week, why don't we send Prince Andrew? He could be one out for next week. That'd be a good idea, wouldn't it?
It would. I like it. But really quickly, I want to take back what I said. I think Trump loves the royal family too much to do anything to Prince Andrew, actually. So maybe he's safer under a Trump administration. But there's a foreign country somewhere in the desert he could go off to and just disappear. But I think you're right that the only way he would do something like that, the only way he would voluntarily give up all of the perks is if he got something in return.
It's just to finish, I said it to Matty, I'm unashamedly royal, a royalist. You are as well. It won't take many more scandals for this royal family, the whole thing, to fall down, and they must know that. This guy, there's nothing left for him to lose. Some of his behaviours, but there's so much, isn't there? I mean, you look at Matt, and I take your point, they don't want another Meghan and Harry, but if you were the king with ill health and William and worrying times as a royalist, Kins, right?
It is, you know, and I just think that the king has to stay positive. We know he's headed to the Vatican to pray with the Pope, and I thought, what an appropriate time, because that is exactly what you need right now, a lot of prayer. I know I'm praying for him. I'm praying for his health. I'm praying for the stability of the British royal family. Thank goodness Prince William was the firstborn, because there is a lot of enthusiasm about that reign. Thank God it wasn't Prince Harry.
I completely agree.
Royal biographer Angela Levin joins us once again. A very good morning to you, Angela.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, there's lots of different developments over the last few days involving Prince Andrew, whether he asks his police post protection officer to try and dig up dirt on Virginia Giuffre, whether or not he's agreed to stand down from various titles, whether he will lose his title as a prince, which would involve an act of parliament, and what he did or did not know, what he did or did not do in relation to Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein. Which of all of the stories we've seen do you think is the most damaging for Prince Andrew?
I think the whole lot is. That's what makes it worse. It's like putting things in a pudding. It's upsetting to everyone. It's pulling the royal family through the mud. It's making anyone who has any feeling that raping young girls is absolutely disgusting. There's that. There's the thing of using protection officers to do jobs like that, finding if somebody's done something awful. I mean, this is when he keeps saying he kept saying he doesn't know who Victoria
Virginia,
she is.
Virginia, yeah. I mean, again, but nevertheless, paid her 12 million quid. I would like to point out, when you're talking about the raping, obviously, this is what Jeffrey Epstein is accused of doing. It's very interesting talking to one of my callers earlier, Shirley, and she said she didn't think that Prince Andrew should be stripped of his titles because actually nothing's been proved. He hasn't ever been in a court of law and been accused of an actual crime. Even the allegation from Virginia Giuffre that he had sex with her on 3 occasions, he denies this, has always denied this. She was 17 years old. She was above the age of consent in this country. That wouldn't be a crime. The only issue is, was he aware that Jeffrey Epstein, by the way, pretty much anyone who had any close dealings with Jeffrey Epstein was aware that he was trafficking underage girls, many much younger than Virginia Giuffre, 14, 15-year-olds, and that they were basically, to all intents and purposes, trapped and were being handed out as if they were, sweeties to his friends. Now, was he aware of that? Did he think it was normal? I mean, but that's my thing, is that it's pretty obvious to me that he can't possibly not have been.
I'll tell you why, because I had the filming of this some time ago when he went over to say goodbye to his friend because he wasn't going to see him anymore. Yes. But everyone said to him, well, lots of people said to him, why didn't you just send an email?
Yeah.
No, I'm much too
honourable,
well-mannered.
He said he was too honourable, he told Newsnight.
Too honourable. So he went there, and somebody who I know did a film of him, and there were young girls coming in and out and looking back and forward and then running off. It was the most horrible sight you could imagine. They were all in absolutely
Very-
shocking
to
clothes.
Jeffrey Epstein's house, which was like the most expensive house in Manhattan.
Yes.
And that's where Prince Andrew stayed, bizarrely, for 4 days and nights while he was going over to see Jeffrey Epstein to say, I can't be friends with you anymore, what with your conviction for trafficking underage girls for prostitution. And he stayed there for 4 days and nights. They were seen close. We've got that picture of him, Central Park, close in conversation. But you're saying, yeah, there's footage of young girls. Again, he didn't have a teenage daughter. They weren't friends of his daughter. Why were teenage girls going in and out of his house?
But he did say to Virginia that I'm going to guess how old you were.
Yeah.
And he got it right. 17. And then he said, oh, I've got 2 daughters just a little bit under you.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel sick.
Well, this is the thing. Now, again, I have to say at this point, Prince Andrew denies that they ever even met, even though there's a photograph and she's described quite a lot of detail. But I don't, I mean, look, other than Shirley, I don't think there are many people in this country who think that Prince Andrew isn't up to his eyeballs in this. Seems to me very clear that Prince William and King Charles think he's up to his eyeballs in this, and he's doing a lot of damage to the royal family. The royal family are in the news now terribly, either for someone having cancer or for horrible revelations involving Prince Andrew. But in terms of the allegation involving, well, it's not even, I don't know why we're saying it's an allegation. Leaked emails show he wrote an email to the then Queen's deputy press secretary saying, you know, I've asked my close protection officer for to dig, given a social security number, date of birth, Virginia Giuffre, to dig up some dirt on this girl.
Yeah.
I mean,
he obviously did recognise her and did know her, because you don't want to find that information if you've got no interest in the person and you've had no connection with them. It doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? Absolutely not. And so you can see lots of things that he's doing, if you look really carefully and that are going to be in the book, that actually do make you feel that it couldn't happen to anybody else, actually, because, you know, when he says to her that she's got to have sex with him because it is his right.
His birthright.
I mean, it's a very sort of royal thing to say.
And also ties in with a lot of stories that you and I will have heard many times over the years about Prince Andrew. Here's the thing. The allegation involving asking his post protection officer. Now, the relationship, I've talked to a number of officers who've worked in this role, saying that you have to have this very sort of close relationship to make sure that you can stay close to the person you are, you know, basically in charge of keeping alive and keeping safe. Prince Andrew, you know, he was, you know, he was the Queen's son, he was a target. Those officers, they have to maintain a close relationship. Would it have been something that officer would have had to tell his senior, I mean, OK, here's the national security number, here's the date of birth for this woman who's made this accusation. Would he have, without a shadow of a doubt, have had to go to a senior officer and said, I've been asked to do this, what do I do? And at what point would that have gone to the Queen? If the deputy press secretary to the late Queen was told about this, would that have gone to the Queen or to now King Charles?
Well, I think that they're all frightened of their boss. And I think, well, I know Andrew wasn't very kind to all his staff. Now, if he tells them what they have to do, they have to do it. It was a bit the same with Harry when he was actually taking drugs outside his school.
Yeah.
And he had the people looking after him, but they didn't dare say anything to then Prince Charles, because he said that they would lose their jobs.
But isn't it also the case that they don't say anything because otherwise Prince Harry would have just, you know, basically escaped from them, and then he would be less safe. Their job wasn't to prevent him from committing a crime.
Yes, well,
their job was to prevent him being the victim of a crime.
Exactly. They said that it's not their job to watch if he's taking drugs or how he's drinking.
That's a different thing.
Anything like that. And it would be the same because it isn't their job.
But how much do you think that the senior royals would have been told? Certainly their staff would have been aware of these. I don't believe for a nanosecond that these close protection officers don't talk to their seniors and they don't talk to the press secretary and other senior people and say, by the way, this is going on, nod, wink, and then someone makes a decision about whether or not the senior royals are told. Come on, you know.
Well, it would have been very difficult to talk to the Queen, that I'm sure of, because he was her favourite child.
She had a blind spot.
And he wouldn't have liked to hear what terrible things are happening about him. So I doubt if anybody would actually want to do that. And again with Prince Philip, because he liked him very well too, because he was macho and strong. And Charles was sort of weak and loved flowers and reading.
But this is an issue, isn't it? Because if the Queen or President had staff who wouldn't tell them the truth, that's a bit of an issue. What about Sarah Ferguson? She was out of the fold and then back in the fold. I mean, it's a bizarrely close friendship they're having. But all credit to them, they're still very close. I'm sure it makes it much easier for their daughters that they're close. Sarah Ferguson still lives in the same house, so she can't use the Duchess of York title anymore either. I was amazed to learn she still had it, to be honest with you. But all this evidence that she has been close cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein, even when, you know, going with her daughters to celebrate him coming out of, I mean, his sort of comedy pathetic attempt to open prison after he was convicted of a crime, taking her daughters to see him, asking him for money. I mean, the whole thing is just so tacky. These people have no morals.
It stinks. But actually, she said she asked $15,000 from him, but actually she asked for $100,000 and she never returned it back, and he was furious with her. So, I mean, she's had no morals at all.
Do you think he was? I mean, look, $15,000 doesn't cover a weekend away for Sarah Ferguson, judging by the way she lives. $100,000 is down the back. Yeah, that's what she says. $100,000 is down the back of the sofa for a multi-billionaire like Jeffrey Epstein. He would have known. Part of the deal with royals like that is that, you know, inverted commas royals, you know, you pay the rich pay, and then they get access and they get to be around people with titles. That's how it works.
Yeah, well, it stinks then, doesn't it?
It very much does. Where are you on the titles? So he's not allowed to use HRH. That's been quite a long time, Prince Andrew. He's not allowed to say he's the Duke of York anymore. No. She can't Duchess of York.
And he can't say the Knight of Garter. Now, the Knight of Garter, it's amazing it's not gone before, but it's the oldest and highest ranking order and chivalry in the UK. It means respectable behaviour, especially from men to women.
Yeah, well,
there we are.
That's no longer appropriate. What about the Prince title? Because that is conferred to him. He is the Prince Andrew. That was what's on his birth certificate. Well, he was the son of a sitting monarch. Should they strip him of that title? Should he give it up, or should there be an Act of Parliament, or not?
Well, I think there should be an Act of Parliament. They can't take it away without Parliament. I mean, they said the other day that they didn't want to make the Parliament be so busy. But I mean, this is very important. It's not busy.
Is it important?
I think that King Charles was thinking again, and William absolutely wants to get rid of Prince. I think people think a Prince is much more important than Duke, actually.
Of course.
It sounds much better. So they've got to pull it out, and it's just too bad. And if it takes a year, then he's got to just stay away and not be seen and not be in his home either. I mean, it is absolutely...
Are we paying for any of his home? I mean, I know he's in this sort of, you know, he does get some money. He got money from the lake. We're not paying for anything.
No.
I really do not want a penny of my money going on this man.
No, neither do I. But actually, because of that, he's got to keep it clean and nice and working well. And they think that it's not going to happen. You see, he's got a contract that goes up to 2078, right? And if then he can be thrown out.
I don't think he's going to live that long.
Do that. Someone said this morning that you can find reasons to stop the contract. Okay. So let's hope for that, because they don't even want him anywhere near using the horses, using the fields, anything at all.
He's going to be banished. We need to find a desert island for him. I mean, what about Jeffrey Epstein's old home? Angela Levin, we'll have to leave it there. Royal biographer Angela Levin, thank you very much. Well, she wants all the titles gone. She's had enough. Do you care? I genuinely don't want a nanosecond of parliamentary time wasted on this complete waste of a space who is Prince Andrew. I just want him to disappear off and be treated with disdain and contempt that he deserves. But I couldn't give two hoots whether he's an HRH, a prince, a duke, a baron. I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. It's irrelevant to all of our lives. I just don't care.
I suppose we should start with Andrew and the state of the royal family, really, shouldn't we? Because you're a bit of a constitutional expert. Does this damage them, do you think, as a sort of an ongoing concern? Well, for journalists, particularly tabloid journalists, Prince Andrew is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
But that's the problem. You know, this is why you can understand the frustration, if not the despair, in the royal household. And every time they think they've finally closed the door of the Prince Andrew saga, a few months later it bursts open again, and it simply will not go away. And so this, you know, now we've just had the publication today of the memoirs of Virginia Giuffre, the woman who killed herself and was alleging was raped by Prince Andrew. That's brought out even more details. We now have this story about him asking the police to look into her. People are now calling for an inquiry about that. How did he get her?
And the police, I think, have said, despite the fact that he's denied all of the accusations that she's made against him, the police supposedly now are investigating this claim that he tried to get the police to investigate her, if you know what I mean. It's complicated.
And there are questions as to how he obtained her social insurance number. How did he obtain her date of birth? Who was his contact there? So actually there are questions that continue to need to be answered. Now, it should be said, you happen to have with you the co-editor of Burke's Peerage World Orders of Knighthood.
There you go.
So I can speak authoritatively that he hasn't lost the Duke of York. He still is the Duke of York. He's still the Earl of Inverness and Barry. He's not using it. So the King still does have the ability not to remove his peerage title. That requires Parliament, but there are now MPs calling for that to happen. It could be done pretty quickly, actually. It needn't take up parliamentary time, but also he could be formally stripped of the Order of the Garter, which he hasn't been.
So
all of these things...
What is the Order of the Garter? Because I was asked this at the weekend, and I said, it's some kind of chivalry, kind of, you know, heraldic kind of scenario. What is the Order of the Garter?
The Order of the Garter is our most senior order of chivalry. It dates back to the 1300s on King Edward III, and essentially it is an honour given in the personal gift of the sovereign, along with the Royal Victorian Order, of which Prince Andrew is a Knight Grand Cross.
It's nothing to do with that thing strippers wear that you put money in.
Well, they do wear it.
About that. I don't know how I know that.
Well, the motto of the Order of the Garter is "Honi soit qui mal y pense," evil be on him who evil thinks, because at an event in the 1300s, the Garter of the Countess of Salisbury fell off and everyone laughed, and so the King picked it up and said, "I will make this my premier order of chivalry."
I love these stories. Brilliant. So technically speaking, if you were to come across Prince Andrew at any point, he still calls himself Prince Andrew. That's still all right, but he won't be known as the Duke of York. Thing is, he doesn't really ever go anywhere. He just drives around Windsor Great Park in his Land Rover, doesn't he?
Exactly. The days of Air Miles Andy have long gone. He's now putting Andy on his own green. I mean, the King could actually remove the title of Prince from him as well. And the King can do that himself through justice patents. He doesn't need to go through Parliament. So there are other ways in which you could actually take further punishment against Andrew if these stories keep coming out. But I would hope at this stage, having been totally humiliated, that Andrew would follow the example of his great uncle, the Duke of Windsor, who went into exile in Paris.
That's what he should do.
And lived a life there.
He should go abroad, shouldn't he? He should go and live in the Falklands or something. Maybe that would be apposite, because he obviously, a lot of people say the only sort of saving grace of Andrew is that he did fight on behalf of his country, and he actually did properly get himself into quite sticky situations piloting a helicopter in the Falklands War.
Well, that's a very good comparison. I've often said, you know, he was willing to lay down his life for Queen and country in the Falklands War. This requires a similar sacrifice for King and country, and for the interests of the monarchy, he needs to fade into the wilderness. We know that Sarah calls Switzerland her second home, but also people may not realise he has the use of a full palace in the UAE. The royal family of the United Arab Emirates have said there's a palace available for him
where he should
whenever
go.
he wants it. So
Let him go there.
The snow-capped mountains of the Alps or the deserts of the UAE.
I think that's a good spot for him. Let's remind ourselves of what he said in 2019 about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
I want day forward.
Yeah, that turns out to be a complete falsehood, obviously. Emily Maitlis, I watched at the weekend, was on Laura Kunsberg, and she said, you know, we were all absolutely aghast when we discovered that there was an email, which we found out last week, he had sent to Jeffrey Epstein saying, we're in this together, some months after he talked about that walk in the park. And also, they were all aghast about the fact that he said, I decided to do the right thing, not take the chicken's way out. I went to see Jeffrey Epstein to tell him that I was going to no longer see him, but I took 4 days to do it. And I stayed in his house for 4 days, went to various parties with him, and went for that famous walk in the park.
Well, and even worse, of course, in that email, which came after he said that he had broken off contact, he said, we shall play again soon. I mean, absolutely appalling. Now it's come out today also that Epstein said that one of the first people to visit him when he left prison was Sarah Ferguson, who brought her 2 children, apparently, to see him. You know, obviously so beholden to a billionaire, looking for a handout quite clearly. So, yeah, both of them actually have clearly lied and deceived the public.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons they needs to pay a price.
Yeah.
We also understand today that one of the reasons the King acted so swiftly was because he's going to the Vatican for this very historic moment where he's going to pray side by side with the Pope, and he was fearful that this Prince Andrew saga would overshadow the visit, and that's one of the reasons such drastic action was taken. And even in the 11th hour, Prince Andrew still didn't want to give up those titles, and it was only when the King actually intervened personally with a phone call that Prince Andrew realised he still was living in a state of disbelief. He doesn't actually think, you know, that he's being treated fairly.
Well, he's clearly one of these people who doesn't quite see himself as others see him, as it were. You know, there's that famous moment, I think, a couple of weeks ago, was, I think, with the funeral of the Duchess of Kent, was it? When Andrew and William found themselves standing next to one another, and you could see Andrew making some quip, and William literally could not have looked more filled with disdain as he sort of looked across at him and refused to kind of interact with him, because you can see that there's a great deal of sort of enmity between them.
But this is one of the issues. Even now that he's had all of these things happen to him, he still tries to make himself front and centre of any event that he attends. Exactly. So we now think we know he's not going to be there at Christmas, but we don't think we're ever going to see him again, even at private family functions, being banned from Sandringham, banned from Balmoral, banned from Windsor. Banned from Buckingham Palace to avoid scenes just like you're talking about. Now, look, it's absolutely true. Prince Andrew is innocent in the court of law because he's never been tried. So you're innocent until proven guilty. He hasn't been found guilty in the court of law. But when you're in the royal family, that doesn't matter because you've been found guilty in the court of public opinion. And that's what counts. It may be unfair in his eyes, but the monarchy comes first.
Indeed, and I suppose the next time we might see him in any kind of, you know, semi-official capacity, and you don't want to say this really out loud, but it will be the next time a big event happens, like, for example, I don't know, the funeral of his father, where they probably couldn't keep him away. But until then, that's about it, really, isn't it?
That's right, and there is talk about that Prince William, when he becomes king, may ban his uncle from the coronation.
You may
remember...
Which would be quite a big deal, even constitutionally, wouldn't it?
Well, at the last coronation, there was no role for Prince Andrew. He was not part of the ceremony, yet he chose to arrive wearing his full Order of the Garter robes.
And there was a conversation to be had about that, wasn't there? Because people were saying he shouldn't do it. He should turn up just in mufti, as it were. Fascinating. I'm sorry we're not talking about Keir Starmer yet. We will, don't worry. Labour government is indeed still just as bad as it was on Friday, so fear not. We'll be talking about the number of Channel migrants coming since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, which is touching 60,000, by the way. And also we'll be talking about the number of crossings in September. Plus, Ed Miliband was out and about at the weekend talking about how he's going to create 400,000 jobs. We don't think he's going to do it. And Rachel Reeves as well, because getting ever closer to the November 26th day when she's going to give out her budget, which is going to do an awful lot of harm to an awful lot of people. This, of course, is Morning Glory. We've got Talk. Welcome back to Morning Glory, coming up to just after 19 minutes past 6. It is, of course, Monday the 20th of October. Barry says this morning, Mike, I revered the late Queen, but the royal family are in a mess. Their popularity is steadily declining and they need to be careful. I would like to see them being more philanthropic and realising the shambles the country is in instead of being so out of touch, says Barry. And Tony says Andrew and Harry will destroy the royal family, definitely. And I think there's a good point that Barry makes there, Rafe. It's all about, in a way, isn't it? The sort of image of the royal family, and most people look upon King Charles as relatively benevolent. He's not a particularly difficult guy to like, but he is a bit woke, as is William.
Yeah, but you know, the key thing is whether no one can deny that the King's heart is in the right place, whether you agree or disagree what he's doing. We could have had a playboy prince living in or playing in Monaco at the casinos for all of the time. We could have had someone like Prince Andrew as our king. And I think whatever you think about his decisions on the environment or whatever else, this was a man who was ahead of his time on so many issues, very concerned about the homeless and about all sorts of issues to do with the countryside and so forth. But, you know, also you've got to remember, the monarchy is bigger than any one individual. The monarchy has been around for 1,000 years. We don't pick and choose our sovereigns. And so, you know, over the decades, you'll have people that you prefer and others that you don't. The institution is much bigger than any person. And I think we have the world's oldest and most stable democracy, in part because of the monarchy.
Indeed.
Bit of a rubbish day to be Prince Andrew, and it's worth noting he's still a prince. Yes, and in fact still technically has the royal titles that he's chosen to give up unless Parliament want to get involved, which I think would be probably more hassle than it's worth. But, you know, nice of him to step down voluntarily. It sort of reminds me of how the king voluntarily pays income tax, even though he doesn't technically have to. You know, it's a good sign of character, perhaps.
Yes, it's very nice that somebody chooses to do that. But of course, you know, it's a curious. I said at the very beginning of the programme, if we didn't have a royal family and somebody invented one tomorrow, would anyone vote for it? And I don't think anybody would vote for it, would they? If you look at the kind of bullet points of kind of what you get for the gig and what you have to give in return, I don't think any member of the taxpaying public would go, well, that's a good idea. Let's take a random family and just give them loads of stuff.
Of course not, and people don't vote for them even now is the key point. But no, of course, it's a ludicrous suggestion to think that if this were invented today, anybody would think it a good idea. Which is why the royal family serves as nothing but a vestige of how government used to work, and we prop it up as a kind of taxidermy, a sort of sentimental taxidermy of a way of life that once made sense, but unfortunately doesn't anymore. And that's without the recent scandals of the family politics of
100%.
Megxit or the certain Duke of York and his, you know, being an alleged fellow hobbyist of convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It's
Indeed.
all the more troubling.
I said earlier, it's the royal family are a bit like the TV licence, aren't they? I mean, you can't. It's very hard to justify its existence anymore, and you might have a sort of romantic link to it, and that is almost the only one I can really come up with. And I understand, you know, I know the notion of tradition is kind of, in its basic form, quite intellectually irrational. However, you know, there's lots of things that are traditional that don't necessarily make sense. It doesn't make sense you spend 50,000 quid on buying a wedding dress and walking up the aisle in a church, but it's a tradition and people love it, and there's all sorts of stuff. And there is a bit of me on this one, Alex, that thinks, you know, I wouldn't vote for this idea of a royal family, but then when I see some big royal event and, you know, horses galloping down the Mall and the flags out and the bands playing and the opulence of the palaces, there's a bit of me that's fired up by that. Do you think that's the trick of the royal family?
That is the trick, but I think it's worthwhile calling it a trick. I mean, there's no reason why we can't have such, you know, grandiose state occasions for elected officials, although I understand that would leave it, sort of lose a bit of the oomph. But the question you have to ask, of course, is, you know, whenever I talk about the abolition of the monarchy, people say, well, would you really prefer a King Boris, a King Starmer, a King Truss? Can you imagine? Yeah. And I think, well, we've benefited from, at least for the majority of my lifetime, a woman who's done a perfectly good job being the head of state in that she didn't really say very much. King Charles is doing a similar kind of thing. But when people say to me, well, would you really want a King Boris? I think, well, what if we had a King Andrew? He's still 8th in line to the throne. Not only that, but when an MP is sworn into Parliament, they can swear if they like on a Bible, on a Quran, on a book of law. They could probably swear in on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets if they made an argument strongly enough. But they must swear allegiance to not only the king, but also his heirs and successors, unseen. We don't know who they're going to be. So every member of Parliament who's currently sat in the House of Commons has already sworn allegiance to King Andrew, should that ever come to be. They've already done it unseen. In fact, to the extent that Clive Lewis, when he swore in, he swore allegiance to King, but forgot to say heirs and successors. And you know what? They made him do it again. Yes, so that's right. If this man who is 8th in line to the throne becomes the king, then it would literally be treasonous for any of our MPs to try to do anything about it, because unseen, prior to the facts, a priori, they have already sworn allegiance to this man. That is the problem of monarchy.
No, I agree. Those that passionately support the idea of monarchy. I mean, there are people who just like the kind of royal mugs at a jubilee and the flags and all of that. I kind of almost buy into it in a kind of showbiz sort of way. But others do not unreasonably argue that there is a curious, again, it comes back to sort of historic tradition, etc., but it kind of shouldn't work, but it does. And its greatest strength is that it's not particularly political, despite sort of allegiances and phrases and nods of getting laws through that have to happen that they would never be argued against. So it's a great way, bizarre as it is, of doing business. It's a kind of win-win for those that support it.
Yeah, but it also makes it a bit of a farce. And I think that it depends on the context you're speaking in as to how important and political it is. I mean, one criticism I've often made is that if I try to point out that the monarchy is essentially a redundant institution that's still costing a lot of money, and by the way, when you hear this stuff about £12 million being paid in settlement, that's about $16 million to Virginia, to the victim or the victim's family now, I suppose. Yes. It kind of makes a bit of a farce of the idea that, well, don't you think that the royal family bring in a lot of sort of tourism money to the country? It's like, are we serious right now? We're talking about the head of state. We're talking about the man who claims by birthright to rule over his subjects. That's you and me, to the extent that we have to incessantly refer to his Majesty and Highness. I like to remind people that Highness is a relative term. Higher than what? Higher than who? And on what grounds? And that this is something which would automatically be conferred onto a man like Andrew if he just so happened to be in line for the throne. You're right. Like it's a sentimental tradition, and it works when it works, but it doesn't when it doesn't. So when I remind people that this is redundant and should be done away with, they say to me, well, you have to understand, Alex, like they don't really have that much political power. You know, they're not really doing anything that's that important anymore, so you don't need to worry about it. And then I say, well, then what's the point in having them in the first place? And I'm told that they're somehow integral to the upkeep of our political system. You can't have it both ways.
Indeed, you can't, and that's what it is, a sort of curious conundrum in that respect. We were talking in the office, Alex, before the show about the if you were to get rid of it. I would imagine there'd be quite a lot of, you know, Brexit was tricky, rightly or wrongly, but it was tricky, and this would be, you know, there'd be potential similar hurdles and bureaucracy surrounding this, would there not?
I'm not so sure. I mean, if the monarchy had, suppose that the monarchy were to rid itself of its official powers, it no longer does the king have to sign off on laws before they pass into Parliament. No longer is the king exempt from hereditary taxes. No longer any of this stuff. It just goes away. That could have happened 5 hours ago. Would you have even noticed? Would there even be a difference? Our government already functions efficiently and well, not so efficiently and effectively, but I mean to say as efficiently and effectively as it would do, were it not for this sort of strange man in a throne who claims to be in charge of the whole affair, but anytime anything remotely scandalous comes up, just backs off and says, well, you know, I don't really like to get involved in politics. Okay, why don't we continue that trend? I quite like the idea of them not being involved in politics, but why not go the whole hog? If that's what makes the monarchy so good and harmless in this country, that they don't get involved, then why don't they just go away altogether? And don't get me wrong, I don't mind these people. I'm sure they're perfectly nice. I've never met a member of the royal family. Funnily enough, I've never been invited to Buckingham Palace.
Outrageous.
And I must say that I am glad that £12 million has gone to. I'd rather it be with Virginia Giuffre
I get that.
Than with the monarchy, but where has that money come from, ladies and gentlemen?
If a knighthood came your way, though, Alex, I mean, you surely couldn't resist the chance to get over there to the palace and have the royal sword dropped onto each of your shoulders, and you walk away, Sir Alex O'Connor. I mean, imagine that in your local of an evening. As you,
know what I would
walked in. Go on, what would you do?
I'll tell you exactly what I would do. I would do the same thing that self-same Clive Lewis did when he was sworn in as an MP, when he sandwiched this necessary affirmation between saying, I take this oath under protest, and this is not where my true allegiance lies, and I hope one day the people will not be subject to such a king. He then, after saying this treasonous speech, swears his allegiance, which we know he's now doing falsely. And in the face of this treason, in the face of this direct treason, it's as if you were getting married. And before your vows, you said, now listen, I do plan to divorce you, darling, one day. But just now and under protest, I'll say, yes, I do. Yeah. After this happens, what does his Majesty's royal clerk, who is participating in this ceremony and swearing in this man, what does he say in the face of this treason? Thank you very much. Take your seat. I would like to know if they would have the same kind of lukewarm, limp response if I did the same thing with the sword upon my neck, if I told them, you know what, I think that this is all a load of nonsense, but if you want to give me a title, I'll take it. But maybe I'd wait until they'd lifted up the sword before I said that.
But would you be able to do... I'm trying to think who it was, somebody quite famous who went to the palace and was determined to show a kind of sort of stoical look of nonchalance on meeting the Queen, and he said, you know, I'm not going to do any of the bowing and any of that stuff, you know. And the minute she walked out the car or the room and shook his hand, his legs went to jelly, nearly dropped to the floor. He couldn't believe that he was in the presence of not specifically that human being, but what it all stood for. And much in the same way when we bow in a courtroom, we're not bowing to Judge Smithers, we're bowing to the kind of institution. That's really what many would argue, that it's, you know, we've got to take individuals out of this. I know that's hard to do, and it's the institution. And if Clive Lewis, of all people, whatever he thinks, often the rule of thumb is to think the opposite.
Yes, well, you know, maybe it is the case that when I got to meet His Royal Majesty, if we must insist on my calling him that, that I was reminded of the institution which he represented. But I don't think that my legs would turn to jelly when thinking of hereditary dynasties that claim a right to rule over subjects by right of blood. I don't think that that sort of inspires the same kind of reverence in me that perhaps it did to the famous celebrity that you're speaking of who visited the palace that one time. For me, I would be a little more inclined to stand up straight on a reminder of what these are. I'm sure the people themselves are nice enough. I might think, well, what a pleasure to meet you. But when I remember, as that person did, what these people represent, I think my back would be straight back up again.
Well, we might see this in action one day, Alex. Who knows? I was going to finish this. I was going to finish this by us both singing the national anthem, but
God save the king. Well, you know, nobody else is going to at this point, so I think maybe that's for the best.
I think we've got this.
God save the king, neither of which I believe in.
He is Andrew Lownie, author of the sensational royal book about Andrew and Fergie, entitled "The Rise and Fall of the House of York." Welcome, Andrew.
Very nice to be back, Kevin.
Well, first of all, this is your book. Bestseller, Sunday Times bestseller, fully deserved. As I just said, I think it was already looking pretty bad for Andrew and Fergie before your book came out, and I think that sort of set the ball rolling on his final fall from grace. Now, this book came out today. This is Virginia Griffey's book, Nobody's Girl, and she, of course, is the former Epstein girl, if you like, who says that Andrew sexually abused her on 3 different continents, effectively raped her. And Andrew denies this, to which we all say, well, why did you give her £12 million not to go to court? And frankly, following last weekend's revelation that Prince Andrew flat out lied about cutting off his relations with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein because he told Emily Maitlis, that's it, I'll never speak to him again. We found out later, or last weekend, that he sent a subsequent email to Epstein saying, oh, sorry about this, we're in this together, let's play again soon. I'm sure everything will pass over and we'll be fine. So that we know he's a liar, so whether or not you want to believe him that he didn't have sex with Virginia Giffey on 3 continents is up to you. I, for one, don't believe him. But this book, your book, forensically investigated, and now Virginia's posthumous book, Nobody's Girl, does expose Prince Andrew for the horrendous individual that he really is. I mean, the man doesn't, I mean, we know he's not particularly bright, but he doesn't even seem to have any kind of a moral antenna whatsoever. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I would say the same also about Sarah Ferguson. There are just no moral boundaries there. I think it's entitled, I think, just sums it up for both of them. They had this sense of sort of invincibility, and I think that was partly because they were protected. Attempts to try and report them, for example, to the Queen, attempts to kind of rein him in. If the police protection officer complained, he found he might be moved to the beat in Brixton. So they were able to operate with impunity. And we know that, and it's said in Jeffrey's book, and I say it in my book, that ABC television were told by the palace that if they mounted ran this program about Andrew, they would lose all access to the royal family. So I think there's a bigger story here. I mean, we've got Andrew, as you say, not a particularly pleasant figure, but we've also got the fact that he was protected by the various institutions that are supposed to be there, in some ways to protect us. I mean, the Metropolitan Police didn't bother to investigate, for example. I hope they will do so now. And time again, things were just shut down to make sure that no one knew about it.
I've got a lot of sympathy for the King having to preside over this debacle. Poor Queen before, the late Queen, of course, before him, had to deal with her errant son as well. We're always told that Andrew was her favourite son. I've got a lot of sympathy with the King having to deal with this. I'm not personally, let me know what you think, I'm not personally thrilled with his solution to this situation, which is Andrew renouncing, if you like, his titles, saying I won't use them anymore. I think this is a moment. I think that the reason the King doesn't want this to go through Parliament, he doesn't want an Act of Parliament, is because it will sort of drag the whole affair through the parliamentary mud, if you see what I mean, and make it a big talking point again. He wants a quieter life for the royals. He wants the royals' name not to be smirched any further. But I don't think it's good enough. I think this is a case where the people should be telling the King, look, I'm sorry, it's not the Middle Ages anymore. We're in charge here, and we do want this issue to go through Parliament, and we do want the Prince Andrew to be officially stripped of his 3 titles, the Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and the Barony Kildare in Northern Ireland. We do want this officially done. We don't want it just sort of kind of swept under the carpet and say, well, he won't use these titles again. What do you think about that, Andrew?
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I mean, I think, it's all window dressing, and I agree, public opinion is way ahead of the palace. I mean, they never seem to play catch up properly. It's too little, too late. I think the hope is that this will satisfy the peasants, and they can go back to the system as it normally is. And I think there's been a huge shift in tone and public opinion just in the last couple of days as more of these lies emerge, and driven, I think, partly by social media, but I think also a much more emboldened press. And it's exciting to see the power of a book like Virginia Giuffre's changing things. I mean, this has really brought home really how sordid the whole thing was, and it's very poignant because here she is writing from beyond the grave, but in some ways delivering the final death knell to Andrew. But I think the problem up till now is there's been very little royal accountability. They're not subject to any parliamentary scrutiny, which I hope will now change. They're exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. There's no royal register. The royal wills are unsealed, and it's allowed them to operate in a very secretive way. And I think, if they are to command the trust and respect of the nation, and most of us do think the royal family are wonderful, and they do a great job, but if they're going to command that respect, they have to, one, get rid of these bad apples like Andrew, and they have to be a little bit more open.
Yeah, I think a recent poll over the last couple of days has revealed that more than 80% of the people of this country do want an Act of Parliament. And as I say, I don't want to over-criticise Charles here, but I think he's doing what the royal family always do in these circumstances. They try and sort of sweep it under the carpet and hope it'll all blow over. Well, this is a time where I think the people have to say to the royal family, have to say to the King, actually, we're in charge here, and we demand that this man, this brother of yours, gets his just deserts, and you're not going to get away with him just saying, oh, all right, I won't use the titles anymore. That is not good enough. Let's talk, if you don't mind, for a second, Andrew. I mean, you say that Virginia Giuffre's book will have a very powerful effect, and it will, and it contains details that, I mean, basically, I can say this as a person, and I'm sure you can. Now that we found out 100% that Andrew is a liar, he lied about his relationship with, cutting off his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I'll never talk to him again. Well, 2 weeks later, he sends an email saying, hello, mate, well, we're in this together, but sure it'll all blow over and we'll play again soon. How wonderful was that? I say that when he says he did not defile poor Virginia Giuffre on 3 continents, he's just a liar. And if you read this book, I think it's going to be very hard for anyone to believe that he's not lying about Virginia Giuffre. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think I've said that in the course of 4 years' research, I didn't find I had to constantly check statements that both he and Sarah Ferguson made for accuracy, because they lie all the time. I mean, she was actually staying with Epstein for years after she claimed publicly to have cut off any contact. And again, one of the emails reveals that she called him a dearest friend, and how kind and generous you've been. She lied about how much money he'd paid her. She said it was 15,000. It was more like 2 million. So it's all beginning to unravel now, and you're absolutely right. Public opinion now wants some sort of retribution. I think it's extraordinary that he remains a Councillor of State in effect. He, I think, is still an honorary Vice Admiral. They haven't ripped down his Garter flag from St George's, and we do need, I think that, there does need to be a proper shaming of him. I mean, otherwise he will continue as he has always done and get away with it.
Exactly right. Now, a little bit about Virginia Giuffre. I'm fond of saying, if you want to think about the ramifications of the Epstein scandal, the way Prince Andrew and other powerful men have behaved around these poor, vulnerable victims of Jeffrey Epstein's sex ring, I said, if you want to understand what this can lead to, poor Virginia Giuffre, 41 years old, committed suicide in Australia. But before I go too far with that, you have to think about the Epstein saga, the Epstein scandal generally. Epstein died in prison. They say he killed himself. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Virginia Giuffre, do you think she committed suicide, or do you think something else happened to her?
Well, I'm pretty certain that Epstein was murdered. I don't know the circumstances about Virginia Giuffre, but I think there's a great deal of silence about the circumstances of her death. Certainly the people who knew her well said that she was looking forward to the publication of her book, that she was certainly not suicidal. There had been marital problems, but she was not. I mean, think of all the things that she had gone through in her life and come through. So I think there are some big questions over her death, and the fact that there's so little information about it, I think, is slightly suspicious. And certainly a lot of people in this case seem to have just died of mysterious deaths. So it is a wider net that has in a sense taken place here. But I think certainly in the book I make quite a strong case for Epstein's murder. I've seen some FBI files that actually named the person who actually killed him.
Yeah. And a quick word about Virginia's book, which has got, I haven't managed to read the whole thing, it only came out today, but it's got details. As I say, it's going to be very difficult going forward for Andrew to stick to what I say is his lie, that he never met Virginia Giuffre, despite the picture of him with his arm around her.
Well, we have plenty of email testimony, partly some that's been released recently, but even in the book I have stories of him trying to smear Virginia Giuffre. I mean, here we've got the police protection officer being told against all the law to basically fight, to investigate her, and the sharing of actually material that should be protected under data protection. But I have stories in the book of PR firms being brought in to basically undermine her. And them discussing just after the publication of the picture. So I mean, he's recorded quite extensively discussing Giuffre and how they deal with her. So I mean, this is the problem. He's not a very good liar. But I think he thought that a lot of these lies wouldn't come out. Yes. And I think we have to pay tribute to Giuffre, because until she really spoke out publicly, this story may well have never emerged.
Yeah, we learned today that apart from trying to inveigle his Scotland Yard Royal Protection Officer into digging up dirt on Virginia Giuffre, that he actually hired internet trolls to plant dirt about her. So really horrible activities on the part of this man. Also in Virginia's book, she talks of her sexual encounters with Prince Andrew. Won't go into too much detail, but she said he was very aggressive sexually and was fixated on her feet. And the details are so intricate, if you like, that again, Andrew maintaining his innocence in terms of what he did to this girl. It's getting more and more ridiculous. And what I would have done if I was the king last week on Friday, when he allowed his brother to issue his own statement,
I would have said, look, I don't want you denying this again. It's looking more and more ridiculous. And yet there it was. I continued to vehemently deny the allegations against me. That is looking more and more preposterous by the day, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, some of the statements like that he voluntarily stepped down 5 years ago when in fact he was forced to step down. Some of the comments about putting his country and the monarchy first. I mean, if he was doing that, he would have actually, left Royal Lodge years ago and frankly disappeared. But I'm afraid this is also the line of the palace. Time and time again, the press would go to the palace with a story. They would deny it. When it was shown to be true, they would then put lawyers onto the media organizations. So I think this is a much bigger problem than just one rogue royal. But it's a sense of entitlement, a sense of droit de seigneur that he shows all the time, complete lack of any sort of contrition. And I agree. I think King Charles has shown himself to be very weak, and he should have stepped in here and he should have made the statement last week, and he should have apologized on behalf of the family, said they were distancing themselves from him, and that they would support any investigation if any offence had been committed. I mean, the fact is there are a whole series of offences that Andrew has committed, and we just have to hope that the law enforcement agencies will now look into it.
I just wonder what you make of this poll. We've just received it here of the public very, very clearly clear in their thoughts anyway in this particular poll, saying that the dukedom should be taken off him, because when he says he's not going to use the title, it's still there in theory if he wanted to use it, isn't there?
Absolutely is, Peter, and thank you very much for asking me. Yes, and I can well understand that result of the poll. It's not really in some ways a surprise as the week drags on. But is it doable? Yes. You can take a title away by parliamentary legislation. And actually, in recent years, 22 and 23, two MPs put forward backbench bills to empower the king to take away both ordinary peerages, any peerage, and particularly to strip royal members of the gang of Her Royal Highnesses and princes and princesses powers to take those titles away. It has been discussed it has been brought up in Parliament, hasn't ever been enacted. It will require a government to take an interest in it. But there have actually, when these big stories came out in 22, at a time when the city of York took away Prince Andrew's freedom of the city and his other titles of Earl of Inverness and Baron Killyleagh, a lot of people there petitioned against that he should lose those titles as well. It's been on the back burner. People know the kind of thing that is around and capable of doing this. What it depends on is some move by the King and the government to actually promote a bill in Parliament. And when the government says this is strictly a matter for the royal family, I don't really believe that. The King and the Prime Minister meet every week for a meeting, usually on a Tuesday evening. I would be very surprised if they haven't discussed these sort of matters.
Of course. What do you make as well about this revelation in the Times that Prince Andrew has not paid rent on Royal Lodge for more than 2 decades? There are lots of questions about where his money comes from, how he can afford the life that he has, and the copy of the leasehold agreement on his Grace and Favour Windsor mansion obtained by the Times says he has paid 1 peppercorn if demanded in rent per year since 2003, so really nothing at all, or very little anyway.
Peppercorns don't really cost that much.
No.
People, so you can probably find one somewhere.
Yes.
Look, I don't know the absolute details of the lease arrangement. What I have read, like you, is that the Prince paid £1 million for the formation of the lease, and then a rather more significant sum, £7 million, for the refurbishment of Royal Lodge. So it was a huge sum of money that was paid out. Now, in return for that very substantial refurbishment, there was then a completely different arrangement for the rent. And to some extent, that is understandable. It's worth adding, by the way, that Royal Lodge was the home of a former Duke and Duchess of York, namely George VI, as he went on to become, and the Queen Mother as she later became. But, it would be achievable, but I think it's a simple image of living in a 30-room mansion.
Yes.
that is just so much the wrong thing.
Prince Andrew, the collapsed business deal leaving him at risk of the Royal Lodge eviction. Kinsey Schofield is with me, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered, no stranger to this station, and indeed Samara Gill, who will be here between 7 and 10, will give her view on this. But I want to hear Kinsey's now. Kinsey, what is the future for Prince Andrew, do you think?
I think he needs to keep his head down, go away, and simply just disappear. I don't see. I mean, I've heard a couple of people argue about this, and I want to believe that the palace is smarter and one step ahead than we all are. I want to believe that, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
I am hoping that this is a punishment tier system, and they realize that there is outrage about Andrew now, and some very intelligent individual inside the palace says, well, let's give him the option to give up his titles now in case things get worse, knowing this book was on the horizon, knowing that the Epstein files haven't completely been released within the United States. And so the next punishment could be Parliament, that giving them a way to look like they're holding him accountable, and in another way, giving them one more step to take. But I mean, exile's the only answer. I mean, and I don't say that to be ugly. I just think that he is, legitimately jeopardizing the future of the monarchy.
How much is this catching fire in America? How much are they looking at it? Obviously, there's the Epstein link here and the fact that there's a lot of political pressure to try to get all of those files released when only a few of them have been. I just wonder whether Prince Andrew is being reported on a lot there and what the American public thinks about this.
I think we're more concerned with our own public figures whose names we're stumbling upon throughout these slow leaks. What was the extent of the relationship with former President Bill Clinton? And I always stress, just because their name is within the Epstein files doesn't mean that they've done anything illegal. There are, Epstein associated with a lot of important people, but we're more concerned about some of the people that are our elected officials and personalities.
Tell me about your view on the children, on Beatrice and Eugenie here, because I wonder whether part of the bargaining, if there was any bargaining to do between Charles and Andrew, said, in theory, their titles could be taken away. There could be some sort of hereditary aspect to this. And we're seeing more of a political row now. Some people saying, oh, the government has no role in this. But then, of course, Parliament would have a role in taking his Duke of York title away. I just wonder what you see the future is for Beatrice and Eugenie now, who I'm sure want to support their father, but also must be incredibly embarrassed by him.
Yeah, I mean, by all accounts, these girls are amazing support for the British royal family. They do have both of them have strong moral compasses. And, some would say that's a testament to their upbringing and their mom and dad. They're good girls. And I don't know. I don't think that there is a place for them right now, but time heals all wounds. Look at the way we elect public figures here in the United States, despite their pasts. Mm-hmm. Perhaps years from now, they could step up to support a King William, and people will no longer associate them with the sins of their father, allegedly. He says he's innocent. But I do think that they're wonderful young women.
Virginia Giuffre's posthumous autobiography is now out. What are the revelations within that have been of most interest to you, Kinsey?
Well, let me tell you what, as a Southern Baptist, I don't like repeating most of what I read in association with Prince Andrew. I mean, the most vile to me was, the good job the next day after night one with Prince Andrew from Ghislaine Maxwell, telling her that, he'd had a lot of fun, or that, she'd done a really good job. She was pleased with her. The idea of Prince Andrew with multiple women at the same time with Virginia was pretty revolting. The revelations will make you blush, and I will say I'm glad that the late Queen Elizabeth isn't here to have to suffer through some of those headlines.
Sure. I wonder, we talked about Beatrice and Eugenie a minute ago. What about Sarah Ferguson? Because she's still living in Royal Lodge. Despite the fact they're divorced, they still live in the same house. I suppose the less you question it, the more it makes sense. But what about her future?
I think she is in what a bizarre situation to be in, but actions have consequences. I think she's just as guilty. We saw the email she sent. I mean, the email that she sent to Epstein's supreme friend, I really felt was like the domino that sent this entire situation into chaos a few weeks ago. Andrew Lownie reports that she stayed with Epstein even after all of that chaos, that she visited him and stayed in his home, or she used his home as a place to stop. So I think she is suffering from the consequences of her own actions. Greed and a mismanagement of money has seemed to haunt these two over the last few years. And I don't think that they have considered the royal family and the repercussions it could have on the monarchy throughout the process.
You've talked about exile, you've talked about Andrew going away somewhere. Where should he go? Should he do charity work, as some shamed figures have done? Should he just have a totally quiet life, and should he definitely leave Royal Lodge, in your opinion? Because there are so many people who believe, quite rightly, that he is in some way receiving a subsidy from the taxpayer by continuing to live there, and they don't want him as a member of the royal family in any way, really.
There's been talk about, an abandoned castle in Scotland that his grandmother used to live in. We know he likes to spend time on a golf course, go to Dubai, go to one of these places where we know you have financial contacts. I do think that he's a thorn in their side at Windsor. Prince William, who's going to be king one day, has chosen to make that his home. He's about to move into another cottage there with his family, and he wants that to be their forever home, knowing that there's a royal rebel on the estate that could potentially be causing trouble or more attention to this little sanctuary you're trying to build. I think that Prince William would be irritated by that and concerned for his family's safety. Let's talk about some of the... Can I just say we've hit peak tabloid for Harry and Meghan with this one headline, and there's no other person in the world I'd want to talk about this with more than
Deeply
you.
touched.
Exclusive: Prince Harry's balding troubles has led to sexless marriage. Thank you, Radar Online. Does it mean anything to you that Harry and Meghan are so litigious, and Radar Online was still like, you know what, let's do it?
That is a great point. I didn't even think about the way in which that story would have to be legaled for them to go forward, knowing how much those two, like, it's their favorite hobby, is suing people. Yeah. I kind of feel like listen, I'm sure they've got their ducks in a row, but it's sort of funny. It's like the hair loss and whatever medications we're taking for said hair loss are the Trojan horse to just discuss the fact that these two haven't been having sex with each other, allegedly, reportedly, for quite some time. And the mirroring of this is so interesting because the report says that not really since the birth of their second, Lilibet, and that mirrors Charles and Diana. Didn't she say that after Harry, he never touched her again?
Well, yeah, they were really, really close initially after Harry. And I don't know, I can't remember specifically. I think honestly, just, I hate to bring it up, but I think Charles starts to look at Camilla a certain way again, the now queen. And that's where he, decides, I'm maybe this is not the life that I want. But yeah, I thought that this story was absolutely ridiculous, and we, of course, have to dig into it. A source claimed to Radar Online Harry is very self-conscious about his hair. Doesn't that annoy you? If that's probably true, if it's true, that he would go and write about Prince William's hair loss in his book, or is that what you do? Try to distract from your own by pointing out your brother's?
It actually makes some sense to me. It's projection. It's and deflection, and it's sort of Harry taking the thing that he probably feels most insecure about regarding his looks and pointing to his brother and saying, look over there, look, and it's sort of like the hair loss in the sort of biblical sense, meaning the loss of power, right? Samson and Delilah, when actually William has leaned into it is, is now semi-bald, shaved head, whatever, but he looks incredible and he looks formidable because he's leaning into things. He's not trying to avoid them. And I think that is the metaphorical difference between the brothers.